subtractions from the agenda?
Just if we need to add any other discussion under old business, B, if we need to add fall tryout.
I don't know. I think that 14U kind of covers that. Isn't that what it was about?
No, it was for all.
10U, 12U,
yeah.
14U.
Tournament teams?
They wanted all tournament team tryouts.
We can add it there. Just put
I have that on my agenda also.
Okay.
We'll put it on there, just so we address it.
So then, Steve, under your reports, do you cover all like soccer, things like that now? Do we not? We before would have a separate thing for each.
Correct.
Okay, but now that just falls under 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other additions? Do we need it? I don't think we need to. So, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the additions of B for fall tryouts under old business?
I'll motion to approve the agenda with the addition of B underneath old business for fall tryouts.
Now second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. There's no visitors here, so down to the minutes. We don't have any minutes of June 27th. Do we want to do a little recap? If anybody remembers, I kind of have a good idea of what was talked about. We had a couple visitors that talked about splitting up, and this kind of goes into the old business of 14U. They addressed the concern for kids having to play tournament teams and having to play rec ball at the same time, and they wanted just a travel team. Some towns have travel teams, and they just have those run through like a big Sioux League or another division. It's not tied to their city, and so they kind of just addressed their concerns and asked if we could possibly look into doing that here. So that was that. We had Mitch Mergen stop in and look at the trails map. I think we all had like little inputs on that. I know he's also coming next month. That's going to be a pretty big meeting. I don't know if I can remember anything else. That's about it. It's the best I can do for the minutes of. So we don't have to vote on that, I don't think, because there's not a set. Usually we vote on those minutes. So we'll move on to you, Steve, with your parks report that you sent out.
Yeah. So starting with soccer, we had 53 players. It's going pretty well. It ends. The last week is October 16th. We did not have enough for the 6U, 8U division. I know we had talked about it. There just wasn't enough even split, so it didn't work out that way. Otherwise, I think it's going pretty well. The soccer fields down there are a little soggy, but not too bad. Skip did a good job getting them ready and everything like that. The spring registration will be coming out in January. I guess that's kind of all I have on soccer. Is there any questions about soccer?
So thank you for sending those rules out. I think there's been some confusion that way. I know, like our team, we are lucky to get 3 players there a Saturday. We have 1 player that just decided he didn't want to play, which was fine. And then we just have a couple others who, are either out of town or whatever. But so then there were some teams playing like 5-on-3. Or, like just making sure, so I was glad you sent the rules out, because like last week we only had 3 and then the other team just gave us a player, so we were able to play 4-on-4 with 1 set. But those kindergartners get super tired with no subs.
Correct, for sure.
Yeah.
No, honestly, a lot of that is up to coach's discretion. When the game's getting too long for a 6-year-old to, all right, game's over.
Right, and that's the one nice thing with our soccer league is there's not too much excitement. People just kind of go with the flow, which is nice.
Right, exactly. I would agree.
But I thought the shirts were excellent. I have heard a lot of comments on people liking those. It's nice to have the sponsors on the back too, I think. That's
Okay.
nice. And the, like everything with the soccer balls and like I said, the uniforms, that went well, so.
Good. Good. Anything else on soccer?
Nope, I'm good.
We're good.
All right, then I guess with baseball and softball, there's a few things there. Registration is in the works right now. It'll start roughly at the beginning of January and kind of go for January, February, March, into April a little bit there. Well, yeah, and then I had the baseball tryout date. I don't know if we want to try for the fall. I feel like if we're doing the fall, we're kind of almost a little behind already. And then, but if whatever we want to decide, I want to get the date out like right now. And then I was going to try to get a hold of some evaluators that are outsiders again, and maybe a few like unknown evaluators. I know that was one thing. And then the coaches do want to have some sort of input, but again, I don't know how to, bring a coach in, especially if we do it in the fall. I don't even know who they are. And, have them be part of that evaluation. And I don't know how to do that, I guess. So looking for definite input there. Do we want to talk about those tryouts now?
Yeah, that's fine. Is there a benefit to having the tryouts in the fall? I mean, we're getting really late now in October.
So in the spring, and I think if we do it now, we're gonna run into the same problems we had in the spring. The whole point is so that, like, we need to be setting a tryout date for the spring soon, so that we can let people know, so that they can plan accordingly, because the rule states that you have to try out in order to make the team. Well, when we put the date out so late, then people have plans or weddings or trips or things already planned.
So I think
Some of the coaches came last year and their concern is that tournaments start in April and then they don't have the teams because we don't do tryouts till May.
so. Could we move that tryout up? I just think you're going to run into that same situation now if you start to throw out a date like we're going to
That's
have
what I'm
tryouts
saying,
in 2 or 3
like
weeks.
now I think it's too late this
Too
year
late.
to do, in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree.
So
I mean, I'm open to trying it in April or, early April. Obviously the weather's going to be the issue, I would say.
right.
And I don't want them missing out on, like, I get that side of it too. I just think we're gonna be in the same thing where we're gonna have people mad if we put out a fall date.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't agree. I completely agree.
I had talked about, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I completely agree. I would say if we miss the fall boat, we're going to have to decide that for the future years. And again, I don't know how to do the fall because I don't even know who, if the coaches want input, I don't even know who they are. At least if we did it early April, I understand they're going to, but there's plenty of tournaments out there. And if they want to do 10 of them, they could really do 10 of them. I don't know. We support 3 of them, basically, the Parks and Rec.
And the talk was, whether it was fall or spring, I think they talked about like the Vera Sports Dome or something like that as an indoor facility.
So weather doesn't.
So whether, as long as we're able to secure that, the weather shouldn't be an issue either way.
My only question too with doing fall and having that team set is how much, especially the younger ages, kids change from the fall
big
to the
time. I agree.
spring.
Right.
And so is that, I know as the Park and Rec, we're trying to be as fair as possible, but that was just one.
I think it sounds to me like with logistics of coaches, if you want them to have, if we want them to have input at all, I think that's a little bit different discussion, but I think the spring, having it in the spring and trying to do it in the fall, I think kids are going to change too much. And then, what if you have kids move away and there's a spot open, and then you can have all kinds of factors. Just doing it earlier in the spring, that way you fix that problem of teams not being
And
together
if we're
for those
doing it
early
inside, we could
tournaments.
even try to plan for end of March, beginning of April type of.
I know kids are throwing baseballs indoors in Sioux Falls that, there's cages going crazy in March with softball and baseball, so.
I just think the biggest thing is gonna be we pick a date and we get it out to
Yeah.
everybody. Try to-
So you wanna go with, maybe setting that up, Steve, and I don't know, if you wanna pick a date and kinda look around, or we wanna try to look at some of these,
I know Coast to Coast was one of them, Avera,
you know,
Dome was
the
one.
hardest thing is I don't know if Coast to Coast, is it big enough to, I mean, I suppose you could hit, but outfielding and stuff like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can make some calls and I'll shoot maybe for end of March, beginning of April. I mean,
Yeah,
to see what we can have for Saturday, Sunday opening. I don't know if there will be any. I guess I'll make some calls this week and try to figure that out. And the second I kind of have a date ironed out, I'll let everyone know. And then I can put it on the website and send out emails and all that stuff.
Right, and I don't know, like, can it be a weeknight? I don't know. I mean, I don't know with other activities and sports and.
Right, I don't know, it would have to be early in the weeknight, so, and I mean, maybe if we got it out early enough, because you're talking 3 different teams, and there was about an hour and a half each one, so.
Sure. Unless you
yes,
did,
the
like.
13, 14-year-olds can, get up into that 7 o'clock or a little later range, but I don't know if a 9-year-old will be great at 8 o'clock at night.
Right,
But at least late March, your basketball, wrestling's over,
Right.
track probably hasn't,
it's about.
Right.
track meets haven't started yet probably, so.
Okay, so I will shoot for the beginning of March.
end of March.
The end of March, and then, into the beginning of April, and I'll try to get some sort of facility booked, that way weather's not an issue.
And I'll probably do just a little bit of research, Steve, and try to look around too to see just to kind of help and get more eyes out there
Okay.
for a facility. If I find something, I'll call you or something, and be like, hey, maybe we should look at this. And
That's great, yeah.
hopefully before the November meeting, we can kind of have maybe a date out there and a good plan.
Yeah, for sure.
Timeframe.
I get, anything else with that? I know the 14U baseball, I got that a little bit further down my agenda here, but we want to talk about 14U now, or just
The other thing, I just want to see one more thing you said you had out. You said also going to talk with other groups to find outside unknown evaluators like Augie, USD, DWU. You had DWU guys, right? Coaches and coming last year.
Yeah, last year it was DSU.
Oh,
Dakota
DSU.
State.
Okay.
And I mean, if we're doing it at the Averadome, I wonder if they would maybe have some suggestions. I don't know if USF has baseball or Augie guys. I know, maybe they have some connections there. If we, get a facility, maybe they can point us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know, I stopped down there last year and parents weren't supposed to go. I didn't have any kids trying out, so I just wanted to see what it was like. And I was really impressed with how the college coaches were. It was run really well. It looked like a high school, like a big high school tryouts, like you'd see.
Yeah,
stations. I thought it was sweet. So, and they were encouraging kids all the time. I thought they were really good with them. So.
Yep, I agree. No, it went pretty well for sure.
Yeah, I just want to give you that feedback a little bit on that.
Yep. No, and I'll work on that place, and that like you said, in November we'll have more to go on.
Sounds good.
And then kind of the next thing on the agenda, the batting cages came up a few times between softball and baseball. They use it quite often, and they're talking about a Z screen. Basically, it's the screen that you can pitch underhand behind, and you can pitch overhand. So, there was a donor. They said they would pay for at least half of it, and that they're about roughly $600. I don't know how you feel about that. My understanding is that it would help both softball and baseball. So I kind of looked at it as, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
I think that's something we probably have to run through Nate, and maybe add to budget, especially if you have a donor for half that, that's amazing.
Yeah, yep, that's kind of what I thought, so for us, it would be only, $300-ish or whatever, so. I will run that by Nate here in the next week, and then, if he says we need to vote on it or something, we can do it in November, otherwise, I'll get it purchased.
Right.
Okay, then the bullpen areas is another spot at the field that they just need some work. It's the big field and the small field, they just are not very good. So I don't know, and I can talk to Skip about that since we kind of have a maintenance guy now to see, not necessarily here before winter, but in that early spring, if we can get something a little better, for those areas. I think he would definitely be willing to do that, so.
I saw one of the boards was even, well, it was peeling, and then somebody ripped the whole board off of the side. I'm assuming the city maybe did that.
Right, yeah. Yes, and he's been working quite a bit down there and stuff, obviously the tornado has slowed him down a bit, but he is trying to repair all those, things like that, and, some of the fences tighten up and stuff. I know he's doing a good job in his things, so.
Is he getting direction from people, or is he just going around and finding things?
No, well, we did those walkthroughs. A lot of that got put on, or passed on to him, so.
We could maybe go through that list again at some point and see if we can come up with a priority list.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Some of the minor things kind of set back, but like the bullpen areas and whatever, kind of move them up on the list.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Kind of a mess.
Uh-huh.
And then, baseball uniforms, this last year we got softball uniforms new, and they should be good for a year or two, I would say. The baseball uniforms are getting pretty dated, so I would say we gotta look at some new ones for that. I didn't know if we wanted to do the 10U gets it this year, 12U next year, 14U next year, and then just kind of work in that 3-year cycle, or if we want to get them all at one time. I'm assuming the cost of it's going to be, I don't know for sure, probably $25-ish, a jersey, something like that.
Okay.
What, do you know what they've done? Have they always just gotten them all at the same time?
I have no idea. Honestly, I don't even know when the last time they bought some. This year I had to buy some that match just because we didn't have enough. So, but some of the numbers, the holes there's holes in them, the numbers are wearing off. The shoulders, they used to be orange, now they're kind of like pale orange. They're just getting very dated, I think.
Is there one age group that you think seem to be the worst?
The younger kids are obviously the worst. I think they've had the most use, just from being used every year, whereas 14, the bigger sizes, there's just not as many kids, so that we, tried to cycle them through quite a bit. But the lower grades are, whatever that 10U or even the 12U ones are pretty bad. So, I can get some pricing and bring them back in November. I just didn't know what we were, thinking, or if we wanted to keep riding this out, or if we want to go more to, we buy a jersey just for that year and they get to keep it. I don't know. Cost effective, that's probably not the best, but.
Maybe just buy the younger ones, because I know that Griffin, their jerseys were fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you need to replace them all, maybe.
Yeah.
Just
I think
younger
it would be a
ones.
good idea to maybe get a quote, Steve, and then because it's obviously going to come down to probably a budget item.
Right.
See what Nate has on there. But I think I like your idea of maybe seeing the worst group and then grabbing those and then maybe looking at the next one. Unless you could also ask in your quote, hey,
That was
if we buy 20 jerseys, 20 sets of uniforms, or however many would cover, let's say 30 would cover 2 teams, will we get a discount for that? you know, and that might factor in too, so then you grab two of them instead of just one, I don't know.
Okay,
Something to
so
look at.
for sure, I'll ask around at a few of those places and get back to us on November. I didn't know if we were open to the idea, but I'll have a few options to present in November then.
I think it's one of those things, like if they need new uniforms before they start tearing apart.
Right.
It's one of those things, like a kid needs new shoes, he needs new shoes, so.
Right, no, I agree. And then, so 14U baseball is my next thing. And, you know, there was a few different options talked about. You did a pretty good job of summarizing it earlier that, you know, basically coaches are looking at what we would call like a traveling team that with the tryouts would lead to that traveling team. And then underneath that having, you know, a rep team or two.
I think with, and maybe I misunderstood it wrong or differently. I was thinking that Mr. Ike was asking for a tournament. He was asking for a tournament team. And correct me if I'm wrong. That didn't have to play rec and tournament because the kids were getting wore out. And so.
It was more on the competitive side of things, I believe. So
Right.
it wouldn't. So there would be a tournament team, or you should maybe look at it as a tournament team and be more of a competitive team. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they would like to play in the I-29 league is, I believe, what they were kind of shooting for, to where those, you know, top 12 kids or whatever would get to play together more, and that would lead to the tournament team to where they could, you know, it's just hard when they're playing rec ball and they never play together, and then we throw 12 random kids together to go play, you know, the state tournament.
And my thing is, I think it would be okay probably to have a competitive team, but there again, you go right into, I think it's either one or the other. So if they play competitive, they have to play rec too, kind of like they do. And other people might have other opinions too on this. But with the way our mission statement is in the recreational department, for the kids to have recreation, I think if you're going to have a competitive team, it's similarly looked at as our tournament team. They would have to, if they're playing a competitive team, they'd have to play on a recreational team as well. Does that make any sense? Kind of.
Oh yeah,
The
and
same.
I think that's the biggest thing.
And the same requirement of as a tournament team. If you're on the tournament team, you have to play rec ball.
So they're more or less just looking for our support and to be able to use our facilities, and that's why they're coming to us, because they can make their own team if they want to. We can't stop them from doing
I
that.
think they wanted us to help set it
How
up,
they can-
tryouts and all that, and I don't know if we can commit to that, and I'll have to talk to Nate, and when Nate's here for a little more input to finalize, and kind of everybody maybe like dig into our policies and mission statement a little bit, just due to the fact that if you create that competition team.
I think we kind of already did that when was that, the spring before our 10U, 12U tryouts? We kind of already did that. It's the same. They have to play rec in order to play on
Right.
competitive.
Right.
I mean, that's what
I
we
did was,
did.
and I don't know. I only know numbers at 10U, 12U. I don't know what numbers look like at 14U. What do numbers look like? Like, if we take...
We had, so at 14U this last year, there was 3 rec teams, and they consisted of probably 12 to 13 kids apiece. So you're looking at, 30, 35 kids, I would guess, maybe getting into that 40. I do know that there is the 12-year-olds that will be on the 13-year-olds. That was a very big group. So honestly, I would say this year we're probably into that 45 kid range.
So so from what I understand is that those kids who want to play on a tournament team, they're going to pretty much go wherever, just because they don't want to do rec ball anymore, because it's no fun for them anymore. You kind of get to a point where it's different. You know, they're not having a good time, so they don't want to do it. So they're going to go on their own, but I think they just want to play for Lennox. They want to have Lennox on their jersey. You know what I mean? I think as far as organizing and tryouts and facility, whatever, I think they can kind of figure that out. I don't think they expect us to do that. Maybe they do, and maybe I don't quite have all the details. It's been a while, but I know they want to play for Lennox.
Yeah, they want to represent.
They want to represent Lennox because they will go play on their own, whether we say yes or no.
You're right.
You
So
know.
my question is too, and I've heard in the past that if teams want to do this, that Lennox Park and Rec has made it very difficult to use Lennox fields. So I think more importantly, we need, I mean, whatever we can decide, I agree with you, and I don't think they're the only age group that's gonna do it.
Right.
Right.
But I just we need to figure out where we're gonna stand, because I also want, and it's a great group of kids, like, they should be able to represent Lennox. They're not necessarily representing Lennox Park and Rec, right? Because they're a competitive team. But like, are we gonna let them, what does it cost to then use our fields? Is there a cost? You know, like, can they practice on the fields after the rec teams have scheduled practices? Like, what is the process and policy in place for letting teams outside of Park and Rec use our?
Well, chances
And I
are
think
hopefully
that's
we'll
the
have
major thing. This is before my time by a ways. I know softball did something like this to where they made their own team, and there was a lot of conflict because it was basically the coach called the kids that they wanted and never gave the kids another chance. And I think that's where we're going to come into a big no-no with, like Tyler said, about our mission statement and about we're a rec program, we're not a competitive program.
So if they, let's say there's a couple coaches and adults in town that want to get a competitive league together. I think this is what we're all saying. They get a team, they get a competitive league together, they want to, because at that point they're not really tied to us and however they do their tryouts, etc. But if they come to us and just say, will you help us, can we go through you, Steve, and schedule field time and use the facilities? That's the biggest question.
That's my question.
And then and wherever that team ends up with numbers wise, and then the rest, if they want to play baseball still, they're still allowed. It's just another step that they would go to try out, but it really wouldn't have anything to do with Lennox and Parks and Rec. Besides the point that they would have to work scheduling. You schedule the field, Steve, correct?
Correct, yep.
So they would have to work scheduling through you, and obviously that would be where Parks Board and also the city, are we okay with them running that and using the fields through us? I mean,
They're going to be using the fields rec time or tournament time, team time. So I don't.
in my opinion, I mean, and maybe we can discuss this now, but like wait for like official like how we want to take a stance on this. Probably wait till Nate's here if we have to take a vote or not. But
Would it be worth
we
talking?
get
Would it be worth talking to Ike again just to make?
I think we should bring
know
him.
what his
I think we should invite him back next meeting just to discuss and get a really clear picture of what he was asking for, because I think there was kind of some mixed stuff there, and it's been a while.
I think
Yeah,
some
I
of the frustration.
Ike and Kurt was another one, I believe. So I can ask those guys to come back and kind of, that way they can hear the discussion, and that way, like you said, I think we need Nate's, there, because especially with the mission statements and things like that and policies, I know he knows those things pretty well. So.
As far as if a group of parents were going to get a competitive league and they're just asking to work themselves into field time, in my opinion, like I would be 100% okay with them using the fields. I mean, they're Lennox kids. They could be our kids eventually playing on that team. And Lennox isn't really backing them besides using the fields. To me, it's no different than. I mean, we had a swimming pool. We had swimmers from another town. They were renting that out and paying for swim time. They were, competitive using our pool.
One competitive basketball team.
Right.
Gyms.
Exactly.
We had a 10U or 12U parent come earlier, I don't know, sometime in the last 6 months when we told her no. He said, you don't get the field.
See, that's
You have to do it for
And so we're setting precedents. Not that I don't disagree with you, but we're setting a precedence that now we're not going to have a tournament team. It's all going to be parent-led, and we don't have to worry about tryouts. Is my thought.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Now, we're at 14U. That's a little more competitive than
Right.
some of the, so that's where I think. At 14U, you're probably sitting in a better position to make that decision. But I'd really hate to see 12U, 10U get into that where it's ultra competitive all of a sudden, and our rec program goes down the drain.
I think we need to be accommodating to the
agree.
parents, so, because everybody kind of wants, I don't know.
It's tricky.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
And I'm sure there is a fee to use, when you're not part of the rec, I'm sure that there's a fee to use the field, I don't know. I just know that I've heard in the past, anybody that tried to do anything outside of the rec, it was like frowned upon and impossible to get field time.
Sure. And if this becomes a thing, maybe that's something to discuss too, is Steve would announce, hey, people that are looking for to reserve fields outside of the rec program, here's the date and time that those dates are going to drop that are open. Here's the fee listing to reserve these fields, maybe. I don't know how that works. Does anybody know if you can reserve other parks departments? Like if you reserve, let's say you want to reserve a place in the park to have a family reunion or something.
I know you can reserve like the shelters and those
There's
are
a
free.
Okay.
No, they're free.
Oh,
Good for
free.
you.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
So I mean,
free.
treat it
Sorry.
similar to that.
No.
I don't know, something similar to that. I don't know. Chet, do you have any other opinion on the subject?
No, I think I agree with you guys are saying that the rec should probably have priority, but the fields aren't used 100% of the time either, so. And it's still people from our community that are
Yeah.
benefiting,
They do belong to the city,
right?
right? So,
But
I don't
I
even know that we
think
should
it's
charge
going
people
to
to use
cause,
the fields if they live here.
Right, I agree with that too. I know our time with tax dollars going into
If that's it,
those
yes.
Right.
facilities such as a park.
I think we just gotta think about it a little bit.
Right, I agree.
Or be all on the same page in some way, whether we choose to go that route or
I just think
if we're looking at 14U because they're on the big field, there's not a lot of.
currently we're scheduling like 3 14U teams, and if we make a competitive 14U team, there's still 3 14U teams. It's just whether it's competitive or rec.
Right.
So either way, the schedule's already there, so I don't think it's a big deal.
Were they asking for the competitive team to be also the rec team, so that core group is playing together all year?
No.
Yes.
Wait,
See, and that's where I think we need to get a little more clarity, because that's what I thought he was
I
saying.
think it was having.
I took it that their frustration was
tournament only.
these kids are
Yes.
split between 3 different teams and they're going to play these other teams that we shouldn't have problems with, but all 3 Lennox teams are getting 10 runs by them because
Right.
They
we've
play
got 3
tournaments.
good, not good, I shouldn't say, 3 of our best players on this team, 3 of our best here, 3 of our best here, and we're not competing against other local teams.
Yeah, I think it was strictly tournament team. They don't play like weekly rec teams.
And if that was the concern, I completely agree with that, because if we're getting 10 run by everyone with our 3 rec teams, clearly these other teams don't have rec. They're playing competitive at that age. And I think we need to match that.
Well, I think, so when we discuss this, we need to be very detailed, when we kind of decide which way we want to go with it, as far as detailed on age group does this, and this is how field time is scheduled,
and we did
and
our.
separate ourselves from, make clear that you're separated from the parents running the team, and Parks and Rec is strictly just on the side of, hey, here's how Parks and Rec 14 was run, and here's the way the
the next meeting. And even at school, I can maybe try to talk to Ike to get a little, like maybe we can write out a proposal or something like that. That way everybody, I can email it out and that way everybody can just think about it, I guess. I think Steve said it. I think we just gotta keep thinking on it and talking on it.
Correct.
I mean, it's hard to even, and I am absolutely want every kid involved that wants to be involved, and I want every kid to have a chance that wants to have a chance. I'm absolutely for that, but I do know it's frustrating on both ends, the ones that are here to just for fun. I mean, even from 10U to 14U, like the ones that want to just have fun, and then there's ones that want to be competitive. It is very frustrating for each of them sometimes.
Right.
Like, because these people don't want this person to be upset when they don't, don't want to play hard. And these people want to play hard and want to win and want to get better. And it's hard for these people to play with people that can't even throw a ball or catch a ball. I mean, and I want every kid involved in every aspect. But I get where there's also frustration to try to get everybody to be better and to.
Sure.
But I don't know what the right answer with that is either.
Well, I think though when they're young, we have they can try out for the tournament team.
Yes.
And it kind of works out okay.
Yes.
But then when they get older and then the team that they're
Everybody
playing are exclusive tournament, then it's just like,
Right.
I think Dakota Valley or one of those, they had like an older tournament team and a younger tournament team. But
And
we
then,
got killed both. by
yep,
both of them.
that's what T does that also. Dakota Valley does that, and Tri-Valley does that. They kind of split them more by, right, there's an
Ages.
older team and a younger team.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the correct way to do it either, because I know the older team does fairly well, but the younger team is back to that, they're getting 10 runs a lot.
I think we just
But no,
promote.
I will talk to those guys and kind of try to get a proposal or, maybe even a couple different options. That way we can get it a little more in writing so that everyone's clear on that.
Right.
I should have done a better job, I suppose, of actually clarifying what they were looking for. That way we can, figure it out a little bit more.
It's been a while too, so like what I'm remembering may be completely, what I think I heard is different than other people, so I could very well be wrong.
And I know
No,
we were going to look into a couple other towns too, and I wrote down like T and Canton.
Yep, and I talked to them. They're actually looking at revising theirs because it'd be the 13-year-old team. I can't remember. I was talking to the guy from T, and he said the 13-year-old team only scored in all their games like 32 runs or something like that. So you're playing 10 to 12 games, and they were maybe getting 1 or 2 or a game, kind of, and they were just getting beat 15 to 2, and so they were super frustrated. Whereas the 14-year-old team was at least competitive. They weren't winning all their games, but they were at least competitive in them. So they're trying to look at revamping some things also.
But they had enough for at least two.
Correct.
At that
Correct.
age.
Yeah, I think we
Oh, yeah.
I think we go with that as like invite Ike back and all do a little bit of deep thinking and maybe looking into that. And I think it's a good idea. Maybe you'll ask him to maybe a proposal, then way it's detailed out a little bit.
Yep.
And then maybe we'll be here and we can kind of discuss and dive into that.
While
See
we're
what we
on
want to do.
this kind of subject, when we're looking and reviewing at things, I also think, and I've read it now, but we need to look at the policy for, like coaching expectations and repercussions for when incidents happen, and so that every incident is, and I know there's varying incidences, but we need more consistency on what happens. If there's swearing, if there's violence, if there's whatever it is, we need to, as a board, have a plan in place so that the expectations for coaches isn't you can swear and it's okay, or we need consistency, I think. So as we're looking at things going forward, it kind of fell in with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
kind of
because
thing.
there was somebody who couldn't coach this year because somebody didn't like something that he did, and then somebody else, you know, does something maybe even worse, and they got a slap on the hand and they're still coaching. So I think that people talk and people.
Do we have
people
some sort of
discussed this.
coach's handbook?
So
We
the
need
policy,
one.
when I asked Nate, the policy pretty much just states that it's a case-by-case thing, which, yes. And then it's pretty much up to the city administrator and to the board if he asks the board. Is
Okay.
what the policy.
You're saying it would be nice to maybe look into putting like a coach's, sounds really, what a code of conduct kind of thing, like.
Yes, and then we follow through with that. Like, there's not just, this gets by, this
It's a little bit
Probably
easier than
everybody.
a couple people will figure it out. It's pretty easy. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think as a park and rec board, that should be super important,
Yep.
that our kids are being coached by people who mean well and aren't.
Right.
So I think that'd be something good to put on probably the next meeting as well. If we're gonna talk 14U, we can bring up, policy for coaches in our rec programs.
Yeah, so it just says that in section 8 of our policies and procedures, removal of coaches or volunteers, coaches and other volunteers may be removed from their position for any violation of the code of ethics as investigated and found by Parks and Rec manager or city administrator and in consultation with the Park and Rec board. And he just said based on that language, the Park and Rec could weigh in on any of these situations if they wish to do so. The park board could also recommend changes to the policy if it isn't fitting well with their expectations. So something to look at and just make sure that we're, as a board, following through, just since there were some instances this summer that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's a good one to put on the agenda next month too. It's getting to be a long meeting next month. It's good stuff to go with.
Fast, I'll keep moving.
Well, we have 3 months of meetings that we need to get.
True, yeah.
So softball, and this came to my attention after pieces were already made. It's my understanding that it was approved or voted on prior to before I got there that the teams would be split by ages. So my understanding is if it was a 10U team, they would take the oldest girl, basically count off 12, that was a team. And then they would go the next 12 and the next 12, and that would be the teams, basically. Now, in our handbook or whatever, the things I received, it just says the teams are made randomly. So that's what I went off this last year, but my understanding is it was voted on before I was ever part of this. So I don't know if that's still, or if we can find that policy or clarify that. And 2, if that's still the position we hold, I'm open for whichever. I don't care. I just want to make sure we follow the policy correctly, basically.
I do know that I wasn't part of the vote, but I do know that, not this last year I wasn't involved, but the year before that is what they did. They went they listed oldest to youngest, counted 10 or 12 or whatever it is, and went down the line that way. Now, I don't know.
Were there complaints about it, Steve?
I'll be honest, I heard both ways. So there were a few complaints from previous coaches that they assumed that's how it was going to be because now this year they had different kids on their team, girls on their team. But then I also heard, and even myself included, I coached, basically my daughter was a 5-year-old, so I would have had the tiny 5-year-old girls versus the, 6, almost 7-year-old girls. So I think there's pros and cons to both of them. I don't know what is the best, I guess. It's again one of those rec leagues. So if we're putting the oldest girls together in 12U, and then, you're bumping those up to coach pitch and things like that, or excuse me, to player pitch, or all the pitchers in 12U versus, the 12-year-old team versus the 11-year-old team. I don't know enough about softball to know that, so I'm open to, like I said, I don't care how it's done, I just want to make sure that it's following our policies, basically.
It should be in the handbook then if that's how we're doing it for softball.
So now what you're saying, now it says
And right now it just says randomly.
Yeah.
Teams are made randomly.
I know since I've been here in town, my daughter's played, and every year it's been a mix. And I would say, having her play with older kids, and more experienced kids has really stepped up. And it's not just her, so you have a mix from, I would call them experienced softball players to non-experienced softball players, and you have from top to bottom, and anywhere in between. It really helps those younger ones pull up. And I wouldn't say it really pulls back the uppers,
No.
but it helps out the youngers quite a bit.
Yeah, and I had quite a few.
I think it's a good idea, how you did it this year, Steve, where you called parents and said, hey, your daughter could be bumped up, they could possibly play up or down, most of her classes here, what is your opinion, what do you, so then the parents had an input in it, and it kind of alleviated issues where if they showed up, they're like, I didn't want her playing with all these, 5.5 foot tall girls, my daughter's 4 foot tall, so, but other parents, might say like, oh, if I knew she could play up, I'd have her play up, so.
Right. And I think we have to really look back at if we passed this policy previously to, if it's already been voted on and passed, I assume that's the way we have to do it unless we would want to change it back. I don't know if that's going to be a possibility. I know there's, people that feel very strongly about softball and things like that, and the reason they fought to get that change. So I think it's something we need to, one, figure out if it really was voted on or if it is a policy and where it is, if it's written.
Good.
So I'm not sure who to ask on that. I know I talked with Clint, and Clint said, yeah, we voted on it and approved it. And I'm like, well, where is it? Like, do we have any idea? And I've asked Nate, and I don't know if it would be in some old secretary, the notes back. I don't even know when it was. If it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I have no idea.
Good.
I do remember Clint talking about it.
Yeah, I was just about to say if Clint was here, he probably would have a good
You're
idea.
saying it too, so.
Well, I said I wasn't part of the
But
secretary though, so
you
it's
remember
not my
that.
notes.
No, I'm not
I
saying
do
that.
remember that,
You
but,
remember that
yes.
it had happened or
Yes.
whatever, so.
Yeah, we could put that on the agenda as well to, just verify how that policy reads, and if we have clarification of that's the way it was made, make sure it reads.
So my question has always been, since I've joined this board, and I have both a softball and a baseball player, but why do we do things one way for baseball and different for
I was just
softball?
wondering that, but I don't have a softball player.
I don't know enough about either sport, honestly, to know. I know why the baseball does the way they do, but I would assume the same would then be true for softball, because you need to make sure you have pitchers on each team and people who can field on each team when you're splitting it up. So I would think, in my mind, that it should be the same. I don't know.
I have a softball player, well, you do too. I would much rather her be with more experience because that she can learn from. So I like the mix of it, but that's just me.
I would think what age, which group are you guys in?
I have 12 U.
Okay,
10,
okay. So that's kid pitch, 10U?
Yep, this is the first year, yeah.
So I would think you would want to make sure that you have kids who can, I know 10U, it's new. So I don't have any use of it.
And there was kids that had their second year at 10, who were 10, Blue was 9, so, I think it went over really well. I was very pleased with how the program, and how they competed even, because there was a mix of kids, there was a few younger and a few older.
I agree that it should probably be random,
Yeah.
like it's stated.
I know that the coaches did have input, correct, Steve?
Yeah, we had a coaches meeting and basically just talked about, who could pitch and things like that. And the other thing is, who they wanted as their assistant coach basically, or, what parent they knew would help them out. And then after that, we basically went 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, for randomness there. And I did group them by age, so, they were trying to get, a few, if it's 10 you half 9, half 10, basically, is what we were trying for. Did it work out perfectly? No. But it was, relatively close.
Sure.
And that's what I did for T-ball on up. It's basically put a list of 6-year-olds and a list of 5-year-olds and sorted them out as quickly as we could that way. Otherwise, I don't know any of the names or any of these people after the rookies, so, there was none, it was basically as random as I could get it, so.
Sure.
I don't know my T-ball team was.
I think we can put that on the agenda, and then hopefully Clint will be here too, because I know he's got a lot of passion in that softball subject. And so he'd probably recall how it was formed, and we can kind of go from there, whether we need to make sure that it reads like that or where we want to go. So.
Perfect. And then the last thing I have, I guess, is the concessions. And again, I know we talked about a few different options. I'm not sure, did you guys get my agenda?
No.
Oh, sorry. Well, that was supposed to be printed. But anyway, so one of the options we talked about was basically when you go to register a player, the family would choose whether they're going to coach or work concessions. If they choose to coach, they would not be expected to work in concessions. And if they chose concessions, they would have to kind of select which week they could work. And it would be basically, they would have to work one time that week, and it'd be Monday through Thursday, like a 2-hour shift throughout that week. And, I understand that schedules are tricky and things like that. I completely get that, but I'll be honest, concessions is probably the worst part of this job. I don't want to throw out an ultimatum there, but if something does not change somehow, I probably will not participate in this position very much longer, because I'm terrible at haggling people and saying, we need you for this, and we need you for this. So, as long as I feel like they are set up, great, and then we can go from there. Another option would, and this was talking with the coaches, that maybe we would have a week for each team, or maybe not even a week, but like you have Monday night this week, Team Hale, and you have Tuesday night this week, Team Christensen. Can you figure out who's going to work? I feel like that puts too much on the coach, considering they're a volunteer. So I don't necessarily like that one. Like I said, if we keep it like last year, there was people to work, but it is definitely by far the worst part of this job.
Just to speak up, I think that's a good idea. I know with the band, so like I'm a kid in band, and we just got assigned a day, and it's like if you can't make it, you gotta arrange somebody.
Right.
It's your responsibility.
Right, and that's what, yeah.
But what happens if no one finds
And then
a
just
replacement
They
doesn't
just don't
show
come.
up? Now we're planning, and this is not anyone's, but we're planning on someone being there, and the same people that didn't sign up last year are now assigned to one, and they're not showing up this year, and now we don't know what they are.
I closed concessions twice this year because there was nobody after my shift. I closed concessions. You have to.
Yeah, it's a big.
What if they could do some sort of deposit? So like when you sign up, you pay a $20 deposit, and then if you work concessions, you get it back, or I don't know.
Do you think, with the deposit, do you think people would be like, I'll pay $20 off for concessions?
So we
And
tried
that's
that.
what they did. They used to have a deposit.
We've tried to.
They used to have a deposit, and that's exactly what families did. They're like, oh, I'll pay $25 to not have to worry about that.
Right? I like the idea of having somebody sign up or coach. I think it helps your coaching get more coaches involved, but I think, like Chad said, it's your responsibility if you can't make it. You kind of know ahead of time.
I think there's more opportunity. If you're assigned a date,
You're gonna work.
you're gonna try to make it out. But if you're asked to volunteer, you're gonna get less cooperation. Like if you just assign them, and then if there's other situations like they can come and like, well, I got a funeral or something, and okay, we'll help them out there.
Emergency situations, but if it's not an emergency, like, I'm just going to the river to go camping this weekend, most people know somebody else in town or a couple of people they can call, in the worst case scenario, if it was my weekend and I had to leave last minute, like for work or something, I honestly, I'd call my parents and be like, hey, I know you're from Viber, but do you want to work on concessions? And they would probably do it, you know what I mean? Because it's a grand.
And the majority of our games are never on the weekend. They're Monday through Thursday.
Right. I just kind of, just an example of like if something.
No, right, but I just want to make that clear. Like, it's not taking up someone's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, really. You know, it's more a Monday, and I mean, honestly, we're looking for, if everyone would do 2 hours, we would have so many people, there would be, I mean, the concession stand would be full.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think designing them is a good idea.
I don't know. Does somebody want to make a motion to vote on that? Or just
So my
Who has
question,
the order?
now this is just from,
how we're gonna do
this is
concession?
a personal, I mean, just from experience. So we have 3 teams that we coach.
Right, you would not have to do concessions.
So you would not have
Okay.
concessions.
Because I'm like,
Coaches are
sometimes I've literally looked to sign up a bunch of times and I'm like,
Yeah,
like this
if you
time.
coach, you don't have to do concessions.
That is what I would say, correct. And then I think it alleviates the fact that people, you know, always don't want to volunteer coach. Well, maybe they would say, well, I don't want to do concessions, I'll help coach.
Maybe
Okay,
you could do
great,
like,
we need more of those too.
maybe you could do like for a 2-week period, you can sign up for when you want to do it, and then if you don't sign up, you're gonna get assigned what's left over. Maybe there's a way you can,
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
So I guess my idea was,
incentivize people.
I basically would have a calendar, and there would be like 15 slots for each week. So, you know, if your week was, I don't know, May 1st through May 6th or whatever, you could pick that week, and then once the games come out, I'll contact those 15 families or whatever and say, hey, you know, you guys can divvy them up however you want. This is the times when people need to be there. Just let me know who's going to be there, and I'll send them the instructions and the codes and things like that. So basically, when you sign up a player, you would pick your, you know, I'm going to work the June 15th week or whatever, something like that.
So that would be incentive to get signed up early too, because the calendar would fill up as the later
Correct.
you get.
So they have some say in at least the time frame.
Correct.
I like
And I
that.
mean, and like I said, it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so, you know, Tuesdays never work for you. Great, you know, sign up for the Thursday. And I get that those things are going to be tricky for some families, but like you guys were saying, I think if they know it right away that they have to work one day that week, and they still don't show up, then, you know, I think that maybe a little peer pressure would help that.
And not all falling on you or the board or.
Correct, right. And then, you know, for those tournaments and stuff, you know, that pop up in Legion and stuff, we probably do need to have a sign-up genius, and I'm fine with doing those types of things. We do need that group of Legion parents to be a little more involved, and I think some of it was just communication with the coach and things like that. So, I think that we can find a better way to do that. But those were, there was a lot of, 8U parents coming and doing a Legion tournament game. And to me, that doesn't make sense.
Well, then I know it brings in income, but are we against hiring out like the band if they want the fundraising money, if they want to work the concession,
Right. Yeah. And
know.
I did ask a few organizations in the school, and they said, it's just so hard in the summer.
Gotcha.
Things like that. Now, I can keep trying those types of things, or even if it was Girl Scouts or, anything like that. I'm perfectly fine with trying them.
I
do
just don't know
know,
if, as a board, we were okay with hiring out.
I kind of brought it up last year that we talked about hiring out concessions and doing a bid. And then Nate, I don't remember what the numbers were, he brought up the numbers and said for what we would get on even like any average bid to hire out, let's say crazy concessions to come set up, like we make quite a bit more income
Right.
into the Parks and Rec department due to concessions that idea kind of,
Right.
we kind of.
It is our major fundraiser, or whatever you want to say, it's the concessions. I will say with the sponsors this year, I don't know what we got. It was around $8,000 just with that, and I foresee it going up each year. So maybe at some point, if we get, some more substantial donation type things, maybe we could look at something like that in the future.
Sure.
Okay.
That's kind of all I had. It's up to you guys if you want to bring up the concessions. I mean, we still have time. It's January, but I would like to get that ironed out just because Sports Engine, it takes them a month to get everything filled out how you want it to, so that way on the sign up when it's registration, when it goes out, it's on there and people know it and, it's all right there, but that does take about a month.
Do we need to vote on that? Is that something that we have to wait for me?
We could, but, you're saying the last minute you need this, Steve, to, put this into the sign-up sheet would be, like, if we have it done, if we address it next month and just make a final decision, is that enough time?
Oh, yeah. Yep, that would be enough time. Yeah, I'm shooting for January, so if we approve it next, whatever it is, November, blah, 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 then that would be plenty of time. November, December, and it should be out by January, so.
I just think if we have time,
then,
then, and we maybe have more members here, and then maybe Nate has some input on that too. That way, if it's not a pressing hard issue, I hate to keep pushing stuff off, but it's kind of a recap meeting of getting this all caught up. So I think that's a good idea. I think we're on the right path there. I think a lot of people agree with you not taking the burden of that and going towards like a sign-up sheet. I think it's been a pretty popular idea. So.
Okay, good. No, yeah, I'll bring that up. And then just the last thing, and I don't know if that would need to be voted on. We've talked about using Sports Engine for swimming lessons, sign up and pool passes. I think it's a good idea, but again, we just got to make sure and do it pretty soon. That way, when it comes to March or whatever, April, when we want to put that out, that it's already done. Because Sports Engine, sometimes, like I said, it's a month to a month and a half usually by the time they get everything rolled out correctly. So
I think a majority of us said that we were fine with the Sports Engine for the pool passes, so.
right, and I just didn't know if it was an official pool thing, because it is going to, it does cost more money basically, because when they would sign up for a pool pass or whatever, it's, I don't know, how much is a pool pass, 30, I don't even know, whatever it is, it's going to take 3%, it's like 3% of that or whatever basically, so.
Yeah, we can throw that. I think that'd be a pretty quick conversation just to throw it in there, being that it might up the price a little. That way, we can have a little discussion. I think it's.
I don't think twice when I say anything up on the Sports Engine about the.
I think a lot of parents would rather do that than have to put a date in the calendar and get busy and forget. And I know there was some parents that talked to me like, "Can I still sign my kids up for a swim lesson?" I'm like, I don't know. I know the date.
We missed the initial.
Yeah.
By the middle of the day, it was full, and all of a sudden we remembered it was that day. So
it's like Friday after Thanksgiving. Make sure you get the Yeah. So
otherwise, I don't have anything else on my agenda really. So, do you guys have any questions or anything? We'll bring up Ike and Kurt and stuff for the next meeting. That softball policy, the coaches kind of, I don't know how to discipline matrix, that's what we call it at school. Some jersey quotes, and so I got a few agenda items that we can bring up again next, and I'll get a little more information to those, but otherwise I don't have anything else.
Steve, are the volleyball courts anything you're working with, or is that all strictly Nate and his crew?
I have nothing to do with those, no. I honestly have no idea. Somebody brought them up to me and I was like, oh gosh, I thought they were done.
I drove by a few times, it doesn't look good.
Well, now it's like roped.
Yeah. I know they killed the grass, I know that was done, because I talked to Nate about that, and I haven't been over there in a couple weeks, but.
Last night I was driving by and I saw like little, like whatever.
Like markers? Oh, the string line? I know they wanted to get the sand in there before the winter, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can ask along to Nate, even talk to Skip about it if he's having anything to do with it, so.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for all your.
If there's nothing else for me, I better go. I gotta get my kids to bed. So.
Okay.
It sounds like they're screaming at each other out there.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you guys. Have a good rest of your night.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so there's a lot to go on for November. And now into old business, we talked about 14U baseball. We're gonna push that again to November, and hopefully Ike comes and all that we talked about there. And then we added the fall tryouts as a line B. And we kind of discussed that again with Steve already, so we covered that. I don't really have anything else except for November is going to be a pretty busy meeting and pretty important, it sounds like, because Mitch Mergens will be here too, so.
We should really, also, and this has come up at other past meetings too, but like, it's brought up, like, you can only miss X amount of meetings if you're on the board, you know, if you wanna be a board member, you have to show up to X amount of meetings. But with November being one with a lot of input, I don't know if we need to send out an email reminder or.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Nate about that and try to get better about, if they're on board docs, but I don't know when they get loaded. Like Steve notes, I'll try to get an email going where as far as if he emails me, just to make sure that everybody is receiving, at least just a preview of his notes. I mean, they can't really have discussion on that because it's not an official meeting, but they can at least, it's similar to if they're gonna go on board docs, you can see them preview them. So that way if you have questions, you can kind of, I try to like jot notes in my head down to see what I'm gonna have. And then that will also have a meeting reminder, so.
I mean, like I said, I know we're all adults, so we should be able to.
Right. But it is nice to, communication is huge.
And it's also frustrating when like, you get here to meet and then you can't have a meeting and then things that are important get pushed back and down.
Right, and then we have a very busy, yeah, I agree.
And if you don't wanna be on the board, then just resign. We get a member removed.
All right,
Motion to adjourn.
I get a second?
A second.
All in favor?